at the so at the moment we can see that a lot of people, a lot of refugees are returning to Afghanistan. On the one hand, people from Pakistan, but on the other hand, also people from Europe are coming now. So, what makes it with this country?
Indeed, on a daily basis, we have around 6,000 Afghans returning from Pakistan, which is quite a significant number. It is putting a lot of pressure on the Afghan government to deal with these numbers, with these high numbers. And of course, we are getting asylum seekers deported from countries like Norway, Sweden, and voluntary returning from Germany. Overall, what I can make sense of this is that in relation to Pakistan, the relationship is deteriorating, and this is having a major impact on the refugees, on Afghan refugees. And the main reason is simply because the Pakistanis are using now refugees as a political tool to pressure Afghan government to provide them with certain leverage, and this sort of emerging tit-for-tat relationship is not helping both countries. But from Europe, in relation to Europe, it seems that there is no coherent strategy in relation to the refugees, and it seems that at this stage we're seeing individual countries taking decisions as to whom they should send back, and when they should send back, and how many they should send back.
And they are coming in a country where we still have war and terrorism, where we have a economic which is not in a really good shape. So is it, what do you think, is it morally okay to send these people back to Afghanistan?
I think that's a very good question. With the deterioration of security situation in Afghanistan since the drawdown of international troops in 2014, we are in a delicate situation in terms of security. The security is quite fluid at the moment. Cities, district capitals and provincial capitals, and even highways that used to be safe, no longer safe, considered safe, and anything could happen in different parts of the country. The rationale for the European Union and some of these European countries sending these asylum seekers back is simply the fact that some areas in Afghanistan is safe, and we can send these people back, and they could resettle there. Places like Panjshir and Bamiyan could be safe for Afghans. But the reality is that, as we saw just 3 days ago on the highway between Kabul and Bamiyan, where passengers were stopped and kidnapped by the Taliban, and around 10 of them, and we don't know about their well-being at the moment. So those sorts of events are occurring across Afghanistan. And of course, we are seeing the Taliban strengthening across the country, gaining momentum. According to independent director of local governance, around 250 districts in the country out of 370 is either in serious threat or medium threat, and that sort of indicates the challenges that we face in terms of security in Afghanistan. So I think we are in a delicate position here, and I think morally, it's very difficult to justify, sending these asylum seekers back to Afghanistan, where they would face a lot of challenges, security being one of the key main challenges. Of course, not to include unemployment, which at the moment stands at around 35%, quite high.
So what would you tell these European countries if they are just going on with this kind of policy?
I understand the dilemma that the European countries are facing, because they're responding to their constituency, and we are seeing, increasing xenophobia in Europe. We're seeing more right-wing political parties emerging in Europe, and to some extent, major political parties like in Germany, Social Democrats are responding to that trend. So I understand that, but I think the issue is that we need to also understand the sort of impact of the situation in Afghanistan, and sending those people back, and how that will impact the lives of these individuals. And more importantly, we need to ensure that we continuously assess the situation in Afghanistan, as it remains quite fluid, and things are changing on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis. So we can't say that simply a city that was safe a month ago would be safe in 2 months' time. So those assessments needs to be continuously done, and I would say that European countries must, I would say, take more responsibility when you compare it to Jordan and Turkey and Iran and Pakistan. I mean, the Europeans are only taking a fraction of asylum seekers in the world.
So now the European Union is also saying, just before the Brüssel-Konferenz, we are willing to support Afghanistan also in the coming years with a lot of money, but we have one condition: you have to take some of your people back. So what do you think about this kind of
Yeah. I think if that policy is true, I think that's troubling. I know there has been rumors, and there was a secret document drafted by the EU 10 months ago, but it hasn't come to fruition, so we don't know if it's actually a policy at the moment, and it will be put forward at the Brussels conference. But overall, such policies are troubling, simply because already Afghanistan remains quite fragile. There has been an unreasonable amount of pressure put on Afghan government to provide security for its population, to create jobs and livelihood at a time when we have a small, tiny private economy, a private market that is only 10 to 12% of our economy. So it will put unreasonable pressure on the Afghan government, and it wouldn't be realistic. And more importantly, what would happen to those individuals coming back to Afghanistan? And when the Afghan government is in fact failing to secure districts very close to the capital of Afghanistan, to Kabul city, or major provincial capitals around the country, or provide jobs and livelihoods. So I think those are raising a lot of questions, and I would say that European countries are those kind of policies are troubling.
Let's also talk a little bit about the support and the money. What do you think what Afghanistan needs, or what they should claim in Brussels for the next upcoming years?
Of course, Afghanistan will be dependent on international aid for years to come. Unfortunately, we do not have a manufacturing industry that could provide jobs, and at the moment we are struggling to pay for the salary of the government officials, teachers and nurses and doctors, so we will be unfortunately dependent on the international aid for years to come. But I would say that there has been a lot of infrastructure work that has been done, both in terms of in areas of the Afghan economy and so forth. And we basically need time. We need time time and space, so that we could focus on our economy, instead of so much of our effort going, and our energy and money going, to the security sector. And I would simply say to the international world that yes, we need the international world support for a number of years, and simply because to give us that space and the reform agenda that has been going on to come to the fruition.
But we could also see that a lot of money, billions of dollars, have been invested in this country, but still the situation is bad. So, would you say that the international community has failed in Afghanistan somehow?
That's a very good question. I wouldn't say the international community has failed in Afghanistan. I think the international community has this circle of paying a lot of attention for a short space of time, and suddenly withdrawing it, and when things getting worse, coming back and pumping in more money. What essentially we need is a number of things at various levels. One is that yes, our economy is suffering, so we'll be depending on aid for years to come. The second issue would be international terrorism and insurgency in Afghanistan. Defeating insurgency will take time, and a part of that is to do with the dynamics of relations within the region itself, how the Pakistanis will play it, how the Indians will play, how the Iranians and the Russians will play in the region. So it's not just Afghans failing here, is how the dynamics of power has been evolving since the drawdown of international troops, and the lack of commitment by the international community, and to some extent Obama's decision to come up with a timeline as to when troops will be withdrawn, and that had a huge impact on the morale of Afghan national security forces to defend the country, and of course on providing boost to the Taliban in terms of the fact that we now have the time and we could just simply defeat the Afghan government. I think we need to clearly send a strong message to the international terrorism and to the Taliban that as we saw last week with the Hizb Islami and Hekmatyar, that ballot is the ultimate method to reach power, not bullet.
What can be done, because also in Europe people are saying, or politicians are saying, we have to address the reasons why people are migrating from Afghanistan. So what has to be done to stop these people from leaving the country?
Creating the Europeans depict this picture that somehow most of these immigrants are economic immigrants. Let's get that fact that the data suggests otherwise. The survey of Afghan people by the Asia Foundation, an annual survey that is conducted, suggests that the majority of people are leaving the countries because of the security situation. So that's one factor. So addressing the security situation in Afghanistan, that can be done with long-term commitment to Afghanistan, defeating international terrorism, putting pressure on the neighboring countries to play fair and don't use terrorism and insurgency as a tool to deepen their strategic influence in Afghanistan. The second issue is then unemployment. We need to create jobs. Afghan government has been doing a lot in terms of coming up with a reform agenda. It is going to take time. Unfortunately, this government's time has been consumed on security issues. The president is very clear that we want to focus on generating the Afghan economy that is capable of generating employment and jobs. And I think with international aid we could do that. We could invest in key sectors such as electricity, mining and so forth. Agriculture would be another one that is heavily that generates jobs quite a lot. And finally, addressing the regional dynamics. I think these three key elements must go hand in hand in order to address the issue of Afghanistan and refugee crisis.
And if you have to summarize this in 20 seconds for a short TV story, so what has to be done to keep the people here? Key points?
The key points are clearly addressing the security challenges that we are facing in Afghanistan. The second is to create jobs in the country, investing heavily in Afghan infrastructure in areas of electricity, dams, mining and so forth. And finally addressing the regional power dynamics in Afghanistan. That is, unfortunately, all of these three factors are contributing to the refugee crisis that we are seeing. Fantastic. Thank you.